The opinions expressed by the following storytime are historical facts, not alternative facts. They do not necessarily reflect the views of the content creator. They may contain words you do not like, beliefs you do not share, or cause you to think about things you'd rather not. Viewer discretion is advised. In the social justice system, historically based offenses are considered especially heinous. On the internet, the dedicated skeptics who investigate these vicious realities are members of an elite squad known as the Special Snowflakes Unit. These are their stories.
This video will offend some people, so let's crank it up to 11 and let's get started. I wanted to talk about, Donald J. Trump versus Adolf Hitler. You hear a lot of people commenting on the protests that are going on and about people's behavior and using the term Nazi because that's the catch-all phrase of everything evil in this world. And I think people are using it now to justify beating the crap out of someone whose opinions are different than their own. For you guys out there, I just want to give you a little notice, a little heads up. When you go out and you punch someone whose opinions you don't like and basically expect everyone to just be chill with that, that's actually what the Nazis did. So the people that you're calling Nazis, there's nothing that they could have done that justifies getting punched in the face. I'm sorry. Your opinion of someone else's opinion is not grounds for physical violence. It really isn't. In history, looking back, we have 20/20 hindsight. We know now what Germany didn't know when Hitler first started coming to power. Within their Nazi party, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which is such a mouthful, no wonder they shortened it to Nazi, which, interestingly enough, Hitler used to hate the word Nazi because where he was from, it meant a backwards peasant. It was kind of colloquial, something like hillbillies. I wanted to start with the history of Hitler because, it's his story of coming to power. It has more to do with the economic downturns that we're facing today. After World War I, Germany was held responsible as the instigators of the war, and thereby they were financially responsible to repay all of the Allied countries. They did so because that was what the treaty was, and it came out, at least across to the people, as more of a punishment than a treaty. It got so bad at some points that it would require more marks than you could fit in a wheelbarrow to buy a single loaf of bread. The mark was devalued to the point of 1,000,000 marks to $1 American dollar. That kind of crushing destruction of the financial hierarchy in a country can create a lot of nasty bedfellows, if you will. Now, I think a lot of people that really believed in what Hitler was saying, they generally believed that he was a populist leader who was going to bring Germany back to a strong and powerful country. I'm not advocating for anything that these parties and these people have done in history and everything else like that. But I do want people out there to appreciate that if you're going to fight a pig and you end up rolling around in mud, the pig's quite happy to be there. You, on the other hand, are covered in mud. When you decide that you're going to go out there and you're going to burn vehicles and break windows and wreck property, you're not hurting those people that you think you want to hurt. You might be protesting against Trump, for example. Do you think it hurts Trump when you smash windows of Starbucks? Do you really think it affects the people that you're trying to affect? Because it doesn't. The reality of the situation is if you step back from your narratives and you look at it, that violence during protest doesn't affect those protested against, but it affects the communities in which the protest occurs. And if this protest is occurring in your neighborhood, on your campus, why? A lot of these are professional protesters, for lack of a better term. They're there to cause problems. Unfortunately, they're wolves in sheep's clothing, and they lead the other sheep to taking a path that they wouldn't have taken had the opportunity not presented itself. After large terrorist event, you have closing of ranks of any country, and that is completely understandable. You have a duty to your nation above other nations, and I understand that. I'm Canadian, and I'm very proud to be Canadian. I would defend being Canadian because I believe it's something worth defending. Those actions that are taken by our governments shortly following tragedies really do tell a lot about our willingness to trade safety for freedom, because it does unfortunately fall to a choice between the two. Either you want freedom or you want safety, because ne'er the twain shall meet. After the Reichstag, which was the German parliament, burnt down, the government, and at the time, Hitler was chancellor, which is essentially vice presidency. And it's not an elected position like president. It is appointed by the president. So President Hindenburg, and yes, it's not lost on me that the Hindenburg Zeppelin was named after President Hindenburg, and both of them, after a fiery, flaming crash, brought us all the wonderful statement, "Oh, the humanity." With the government the way it was in the 1930s, you're looking at a country that was being squeezed dry by previous bad decisions. The people who should quote-unquote suffer were suffering right along with those who had no business suffering. They were farmers and families and basically people that were so disenfranchised because decisions were made and choices were made and they weren't part of them. And they thought that this bright, young propagandist from the Nazi Party was going to bring the power of Germany back to the people. And that's the platform he ran on. Now, I know a lot of people out there who say, oh, well, had we known that he was going to do what he did to the Jews, they never would have allowed it. Well, that's kind of a sticky wicket. You see, Hitler was never candid about his feelings on the Jews. He learned from his environment that the financiers, which were believed to all be Jewish, stereotypes, right? Stereotypes existed back then too. In other words, he didn't necessarily originate the thought. It was introduced to him. Not advocating or excusing what he did, simply telling you what happened. Anyway, back to the point. You've got a populace that was hurting financially, which is such a strong motivator, but they're hurting pride-wise as well, which is another huge motivator. Then you throw in a dash of a charismatic, strong speaker who had some pretty hinky ideas, but on the whole, he was saying what people wanted to hear. When he first, went up for an election for the presidency, he got 30% of the vote and forced a second election almost right after and got 36% of the vote. And it was actually through that forcing of the second vote that he basically cornered the president into putting him as the chancellor, because otherwise he threatened to continue triggering votes until he got elected. By this point, Hindenburg was an old man, and he just wasn't interested in doing that. He wanted to get things done for the country, etc. So he just acquiesced. He said, fine, come, at least under my thumb, I can keep an eye on you. But his health went south, and he lost his grip on the reins. And, well, history shows us what happens. We want to blame that one person that was in power, but Hitler wasn't the only person making these decisions for the country. Hitler was the face, and he may have sometimes been the mind, but there were a lot of other people standing right there with him on those stages, in those offices. He was not alone. After the Reichstag fire, there was the Reichstag fire decree. Basically what that did is it gave the government the power to shut down any dissenting opinions. They were able to suppress any kind of publications that weren't friendly. They were used to imprison people. And as these decrees were passed, he actually got the power to put all of the communists, or people that he thought of as communists, into Dachau. And, people who wouldn't kowtow to the Nazi cause, then they also were then shipped away. And their families were told that they are in protective custody. And obviously it wasn't. It wasn't for their protection anyway. I suppose it was protection to the state. The second big one was the Enabling Act. Basically gave the cabinet the authority to make laws without the participation of the Reichstag for 4 years. And that's where we need to really focus our concern. If Trump is truly going to be the next Hitler, well, what we need to watch for is that unmitigated power. And as for the rest of you fucks that are out there, just, oh, well, I don't like this guy's opinion, he happens to be a little too right-wing. It's more about the fact that their opinion doesn't agree with yours. And calling them a Nazi and punch him in the face. I can't believe you don't see how Nazi-ish that is. Seriously. A lot of things came to pass to bring Hitler to the point where he could be the figurehead for this disgusting movement. He may have come into office with the intention and the thoughts, but he didn't come into office under completely false pretenses. He was a populist. He believed that a stronger Germany was a united Germany. Anyway, that's enough rambling from me today. I'm sorry if this was a bit meandering. All in all, the points are essentially, if you're the one shutting down dissenting opinions, you're the Nazi, my friend. Quit fucking doing that. Just stop being cunts to each other out there. I'm Moggy. It's a sick, sad world. Cheers.